Yeah, we'll find out whether or not they're serious. My first guest tonight says that Trump's policy of tightening the vice on Iran is likely to lead to war. He is the author of the new book, Losing an Enemy, Obama, Iran, and the Triumph of Diplomacy. Now, the title itself stands in stark contrast to the geopolitical situation that we see right now. He's also founder of the National Iranian American Council. I'm happy to welcome to the day Trita Parsi. Trita joins me from Washington tonight. Trita, it is good to have you on the program. Trump today promised more sanctions coming in November. At the same time, he tweeted about wanting world peace. Do you know what the U.S. president's endgame with Iran is?
I don't think it's clear to anyone what the actual end game is. And I think that's also a very deliberate strategy by the Trump administration. They relish in confusing the outside world, thinking that they actually give the United States an edge. What in reality I think is happening is that more and more countries are starting to see the unreliability of the United States as a threat to world peace in and of itself. But I think one thing can be said about whatever goal the administration has about this, which is that this type of escalation can very easily get out of hand. And mindful of the fact that we have very few de-escalatory mechanisms left, very few exit ramps from this, that in and of itself can lead to a military confrontation, even if that isn't the intent of the Trump administration.
Yeah, that's a good point that you make. I'd like to share an excerpt from your new book. In Losing an Enemy, you write that going into the negotiations that resulted in the Iran nuclear deal, Iran was supposed to be an irrational actor hell-bent on Israel's destruction and acquiring nuclear weapons. Instead, with the aid of its allies in the P5+1 group, the United States negotiated over the course of 20 months a historic deal that simultaneously evaded two potential disasters, a war with Iran and Tehran obtaining a nuclear weapons option. Now, Trump changed that. Is a war with Iran more likely tonight than it has ever been?
I still think that we're several steps away from that type of a disaster, but unfortunately, the path that Trump is on and the speed in which he is moving on that path makes it very dangerous to underestimate the risk of war. I think the real danger here is not an overestimation of the risk, but rather an underestimation of the risk. Even in the case of Obama and the sanctions he put on Iran together with Germany and the P5, it was still a lot of luck at the end of the day that led to this nuclear deal. It could easily have gone the other direction, in which the United States, even under Obama, very reluctantly would have ended up in a military confrontation.
You know, I said at the beginning of the program that a lot of what we're hearing now from Trump sounds very familiar with those things that we heard from U.S. President George W. Bush. Here is a part of President George Bush's State of the Union address just months after the 9/11 attacks, the axis of evil speech. Listen to the message for those countries those U.S. allies who he feared would dare not to fall in line with U.S. policy. Take a listen.
But some governments will be timid in the face of terror. And make no mistake about it, if they do not act, America will.
Now, Trita, Bush's words are very similar to the text that we are getting now from the White House about the European Union and these Iran sanctions. I mean, do you agree with that?
Absolutely, and I don't think it's particularly surprising, mindful of the fact that Trump is now increasingly surrounding himself with people who were either serving in the Bush administration or who are of the very same mindset. John Bolton, of course, was a key figure in the Bush administration. Pompeo is someone who very much shares the mindset of Bolton. So despite the fact that Trump campaigned on a platform of rejecting the Iraq war, rejecting the Republicans that had brought about the Iraq war, he is now actually surrounding himself with the very same people who pushed the United States in that war of choice.
I want to ask you, before we run out of time, what are you hearing from the U.S. Iranian community about what is happening inside Iran? I mean, has Trump succeeded in revealing more social fissures with his offer to meet with Rouhani?
I don't think the offer of talking with Rouhani has created that much of a fissure. What I think has happened is that because of the incompetence, because of the corruption of the Iranian government and its mismanagement of the economy, they have made the Iranian economy very vulnerable. And then Trump has come in with massive sanctions and a deliberate effort to foment unrest in Iran, and that to a certain extent has been successful. So as a result of this, I think we're seeing these protests taking place right now at the height of all of these sanctions. And the United States is a very important factor in as to why these protests are taking place right now. Not the only factor, but an important one.
Trita Parsi, founder of the National Iranian American Council, sharing his insights tonight from Washington. Trita, we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.